Hi, I'm Villain Theory, and today we're talking about Domino. I assume that most of you guys will recognize this layout by now. I used it in my tier list, I used it in Cable, and I updated it with these two new categories, Variety and Fun Factor, because I think, the sheer fun of a character is the most important thing. The tier list was about power. This is, rating the experience of, playing the character. Um, and what an interesting character she is. Before we start, I want to identify right off the bat that I think she is kind of a build hero. Um, you know, she starts out, fine, but she has a lot of pieces you want to put on the board. You can really build up like an engine of different things interacting with each other. That can take her power from starting off here, and getting very very strong. Um, so that's really interesting. But there's two other things at play here. She's also a discarding hero. So her precon comes with I would say four cards that reward you when they're discarded. Three copies of one, and the other is unique. We will get to those shortly. So you're discarding with most of your effects, most of your events, most of your upgrades, mostly everything in her signature hero kit, discard stuff, and you can get rewarded if you discard the right thing. Um, and most of her discarding, events and things, they count resources, and she's got this ability on her hero card. When counting resources discarded from the top of your deck, wilds count twice. So if you discard a wild resource, it counts as two resources. Very useful. You do have to remember that is only when she's in hero form. That does not count when she's alter ego. If you're using, say, one of her signature allies, which also, want you to discard and count resources. But yeah, we'll jump into it. I will quickly say reliability refers to if I play 10 games with this character, am I going to have 10 good games, or am I going to have, some not so good games, or, is there going to be a lot of variation, or am I always going to have a really solid game, because I think most characters are capable of beating most villains, but some of them are going to take a lot more tries than others. Some will be a lot more consistent, and some will just, have this one vital setup piece. And if they get it in their opening hand, it's easy mode. And if they get it in their, the last hand of their deck, they could be in a lot of trouble by that point. Um, and also, readiness is not necessarily about readying; it's how fast you can set up. So, how fast can your character be at a reasonable level of power? Um, so, some characters are really reliant on their upgrades to kind of, do anything. Reliability and readiness are slightly linked, but not always, which I think is interesting. Yeah, variety is if I play 10 different decks with the character, how different is it going to feel? If I play the same deck 10 times, how different is that going to feel? How many different experiences can I get with the character? And I think fun factor speaks for itself. Obviously, that one is extremely subjective. But yeah, let's get into it. Domino has the Spider Man Peter Parker stat line, also shared with Gambit, who is the previous, hero release, joint with Rogue next to Next Evolution, where Domino is from. Pretty solid. Obviously, defense is quite useful, but probably the thing I rate the least. I'd rather have higher attack or forwarding, but still very good. I'm often using her defense a lot in the early game, although I do want to say Domino is also what I would consider a flipping hero, like kind of like Miss Marvel. She has a lot of alter ego kind of supports and things she can do from alter ego. So you are going to miss out on a ton of power if you're not constantly flipping to alter ego and back to hero. So that is something to look out for. But yeah, in addition to being a discarding hero, I think I went a little bit off topic. She's also what I'm calling a card juggler. I don't know if there's a better term for it, but she can move cards around. She can take cards from her discard pile and put them in her hand or on top of her deck. She can discard cards from the top of her deck, catch them with an alter ego support, go alter ego, grab them. Move things from her deck to her hand, swap from her hand to her discard pile. She can move cards all over the place. She has a lot of moving parts, which is very interesting. We've already talked about, the resources counting twice for the wilds. Her action is part of what I'm talking about here. She can take a card from her hand and swap it with the top card of her deck when in hero form, which is the same as Star Wars Alter Ego ability. So while this might seem unique, you can run a lot of those cards that are, reward you for discarding them in Star-Lord. And I've had actually quite similar experiences in some degrees with that. But, being in hero form, very unique. Domino has some very interesting interactions with it. So it's still very, very, very cool. Alter Ego is take a card in your hand, swap it with the top card of a discard pile. Now, this is really new and leads to a lot of interesting combos. So, you can play a card and it'll basically end up in your discard pile. You can flip down, grab it back, maybe play it again. Now, events, normally require you to be in hero form, but there are exceptions, and even more than that, you can say block with an ally, goes into your discard pile, you drop down to Alter Ego and grab it back. Basically, she is the queen of recursion, the queen of discarding, the queen of moving cards about, and yeah, it's a very solid build, hero and a flipping hero. So really very, very interesting design. She has a lot of things going on. So just to tell you guys what I'm talking about here, I would say the hardest part of her to master is the moving of cards. And also, I would say the most significant part, because even though she wants to discard things, you want to put the right things on top of your deck to be discarded. That is a major part. So she starts off being able to, swap things from her hand with her top of her deck, or hand with a discard pile. And if you start Alter Ego, you can grab something from your discard pile, then flip up, and then put that card on top of your deck. So you can kind of interact with all parts, from the get-go. But you're probably not going to always want to do that. She has approximately a billion possibilities. There's a lot to master here. But it starts off, fairly straightforward. But then you introduce her support card, Pip the Pug. I think this is one of her most powerful cards. I could argue it is her most powerful, enables a lot of her combos and things. Because there are a lot of good cards you'll have in your discard pile, namely Jackpot, which we'll get to, which Pip can just, throw onto the top of your deck. But, if you're doing a strategy with her posse allies, you can put those onto your deck. Because what Pip does, he takes a Domino or posse card from your discard pile and puts it on top of your deck. So that's pretty cool. So now not only are you swapping things from your hand with the top of your deck or discard pile, but now you can search your discard pile for one of your cards or a posse card, and then put that on top of your deck to maybe swap or use with something that's going to discard something. So suddenly this opens up a lot of possibilities, and you can take in one turn 2 cards from your discard pile, one from the top and one of your own cards, with Pip. So things start to get very complicated. And after that, you really need to know what you want to move, and there are a lot of possibilities. I could even use Pip to grab, say, my thwarting event, put it on top of my deck, then use some form of card draw, so that if I need to, thwart something urgently, I have that now immediately available. So you can use it just to grab what you need for the situation, or you can go hunting for value, and that's where these cards come in here. So Jackpot, I think I just mentioned, is her triple resource card. So you can spend this, goes into your discard pile, swap it back into your hand with Domino's Alter Ego, spend it again, then use Pip to put it on top of your deck, use some kind of card draw, grab it back, spend it again. And there's potential to use it even more. There are a lot of combos there. And then next to that, we have White Fox in the middle. And when White Fox is discarded from the top of your deck, you put her into play. So you basically get a free ally if you happen to discard her. So making sure she is on top of your deck is, ridiculously valuable. Blocking with her is kind of like a tough card, but she also has that 1 thwart, 1 attack, so she can be quite flexible. You can use her once or twice. Very, very strong. And I should mention as well, with Jackpot, when it is discarded from the top of your deck, you have this option in the response to shuffle it back in, which can be very good. It is especially good if you have a very thin deck. Maybe you've got, 20 upgrades on the board. Or maybe your deck is just about to run out. If you shuffle Jackpot into a small deck, you have good odds to hit it multiple times. Sometimes in one turn, she has that many tools to discard, and then you're getting, you're counting all 3 resources toward her events or whatever she's doing. You're getting sometimes triple the value of a normal card, 1 extra compared to a wild. So very strong. Probably should also say she has 14 wilds in her signature kit. The only card in her kit which is not a wild is Jackpot itself, but it's got all 3 resources on there, so what's not to love? And last but not least, we have Digging Deep. So White Fox is an aspect card, well, a basic card, and so is Digging Deep. So anyone can run these. So, I put these in Star-Lord, you can put them in Iron Man, Miss Marvel, Nebula. There are tons of characters that have some kind of innate mechanism to start discarding stuff, or can run cards, like Gamora, or anyone can run Caliban, new ally, to start discarding from their deck. But yeah, Digging Deep, really, really good card. So when this is discarded, it just gets added to your hand. So if you start the turn in, hero form, you've got your 5 cards. One of them is Digging Deep. You can swap that Digging Deep on top of your deck, use something that discards, and then suddenly Digging Deep is back in your hand as well as the card you swapped it with. So whenever digging deep is in your opening, in your 5 cards in hero form, you can kind of get to 6 cards basically. You might not want to use your hero ability for that, but it is generally a very solid use that I think everyone should get used to doing. Um, Pip the Pug, one of the top priorities I would say is Jackpot and White Fox, depending on what you're trying to do. They're normally my top priorities, but Pip the Pug and generally her swapping abilities have so many targets. Don't limit yourself to just these, but if you're feeling overwhelmed or uncertain, it's hard to go wrong with these options, is what I would say. Um, Up next, we have all her discarding things. I've already sort of hinted that she has a lot of them. Basically, every card but Jackpot kind of wants you to discard or interact with it somehow. She has 2 copies of her pistols, which are a very low commitment way to discard from your deck, see what you get. Maybe if you put something you want to discard there, okay, I'll just fire off a pistol, discard from the top. White Fox is in play. Um, and yeah, their damage adds up a lot. If you get a wild, the pistol is doing 2 damage, counts every resource icon. Jackpot can hit 3. We've even hit the true Jackpot, where there's the new card called Sharpshooter. It's a basic card. But long story short is, if you have it in play of the pistols, you basically discard double the cards toward its damage. Is the gist of it. So you can hit Jackpot, shuffle it back in. Oh, and we've hit Jackpot again. We've actually done 6 damage with the pistol, with 1 pistol before, which is insane, totally crazy, but very cool. Probability field is kind of her. I almost think of it like Venom's pistols or multi-gun, but it doesn't exhaust, so you can kind of do whatever you need with it. It basically, when you use a basic power, you discard, and you count the resources and get +1 to whatever basic power you used. So yeah, you can get a bonus to your attack, forwarding, defense, and even your recovery stat. So although you have to exhaust and use your hero, it kind of helps with anything you want to do. Extraordinarily powerful and flexible card. And I will say a lot of her cards are superpowers, including this one. 2 signature allies, but my favorite personally is Diamondback, because it kind of does area damage to the whole board, any enemy at all. So, as you go up in player count, a lot of enemies, very, very powerful. If you set Jackpot up on the top, she just does 3 damage to, potentially as many enemies as you can have out, which is as strong as it sounds. But even outside of setting up Jackpot, you can use something like, just use her randomly. Don't really care about what you get. She can pop multiple tough cards at once. We found that very useful. Can't talk. So yeah, really, really strong card. I should probably say as well, the expansion's not been out that long. I did get it a few days early, but this is by no means a definitive take on the character. Bring that out there a bit late, but yeah. So this is just my opinions on her right now. Hopefully it's useful. And I will also say I've mostly played her at 1 and 2 player, so that is mostly what I'm talking about here. Although obviously with Diamondback, I've played enough multiplayer to know that if you can hit every enemy, it's very strong. Good workout, and her forwarding card, right place, right time, are very similar. Deal 4 damage, or I think it's 3 threat removal, and then +1 for every resource icon of the card you then discard. So her forwarding card is basically for justice, which can hit higher, and a good workout, is just is good. I do think they're some of her weakest cards, but that's a good thing because they're still perfectly strong cards you are very happy to have. So pretty good on that front. And then Luck Be a Lady, kind of similar to the vein of Probability Field, kind of does anything you need it to do. There is a random element if you aren't setting up the card on top of your deck with it. But being able to heal 2 damage from a character, very strong. You could heal an ally or top yourself up or another player. Removing threat, dealing damage, all very good. The last option with a wild is choose one. And as we know from her hero card, she can count wilds twice. So being able to heal like 2 allies up to full health, very good with some of her posse stuff, which we'll get to. But you can just kind of solve any problem you need if you hit a wild with this. It's a very strong card. She's got 1 Luck Be a Lady, 2 are good workouts, 2 right place, right times, 2 pistols, and then it's sort of 1 of everything else here. Yeah, very, very strong. Lots of ways you can discard from your deck. And, depending on what you're trying to do, you might try and set that up specifically by swapping cards there, or you might not worry too much and just, let it rip, see what happens. You can also juggle people. I sort of alluded to this with her recursion. But you can block or use an ally's last hit point, It goes into your discard pile. You hop down, swap it about, bring it back into play. So I've got some of my favorite allies for that here. Maria Hill, I don't think I need to talk about much. Very, very good card. You can basically, with careful timing, recur her every turn in multiplayer um, without regroup, which is a little bit crazy. Professor X, I think, largely speaks for himself as well. Very powerful card. We've been playing at 2-player, and if you keep getting Professor X into play, um, he will confuse the villain, assuming they're not steady or stalwart, and then he can block for somebody, and he thwarts for free. So he kind of solves the main scheme threat. He will and then stop 2 villain activations. So by just constantly recurring Professor X, you're always going to have the main scheme kind of under control, and all your villain activations blocked. The guaranteed ones. So in 2-player, the consistency, power aside, the consistency of always having the villain locked down that way is kind of insane. Yeah, just a very good card. Monica Chang, bring her out of play, bring her back in. You're going to keep charging up and bringing in those surveillance teams, which will keep thinning out her deck, which we've talked about is beneficial for Jackpot. So big fan of Monica Chang. That's very, very powerful. You can have a lot more threat removal in solo than you'll ever need that way. But early game, it's a good way to build up like a stash of thwarting to kind of set you up for the long run. Because one of Domino's weaknesses is starting with that 1 thwarting stat. When its probability field is in play, yeah, she can thwart for 2, 3, with Jackpot 4. But until then, she can be a bit vulnerable to it. Not like horribly. She does have good threat removal cards. A threat removal event is fine. Like Be a Lady is very, very good. But it's something to take note of. Beast on the left here, we have a triple resource card. Keep bringing him into play. You're going to keep getting more of that triple resource card. Especially since you can quite easily, by using Pip the Pug and different methods, get a Jackpot back quite easily. So yeah, Beast is very, very good for her. I'll actually put Diamond back here. I really like using her action to help clear the board. I think she's really strong. So just recurring her is really good. And also she makes very, very good use of Jackpot. Up next, we have what I'm calling the backup jugglers, which are just cards, mostly allies, which also help with this. Wolfsbane, Hulk, Atlas Bear, they all sort of look at and discard from the top of the deck, sort of in different ways. Very, very good cards. With Hulk, you can just take a physical, swap it on top of your deck, and then you can guarantee he's going to hit the physical resource when he then discards, which basically means you get 5 damage guaranteed, and you can do that 5 times. Very good. Wolfsbane, very consistent card draw. Atlas Bear is the posse ally I like the least. I think it's a little bit of a luxury. You're going to exhaust her a lot and you won't even get to draw a card unless you're setting it up, in which case I think there are better methods, but still not bad. And she goes well with the posse stuff, so that's fine. You can also just use her if you don't find, if you don't set up specifically, just to look at the top of your deck. Again, I don't know if it's quite worth it for me, but still very good choice. No Quarter, anything that has a specific resource requirement is good for her because of her wilds, which we'll talk about more shortly. But this card is from the top of your deck, so not only are you going to, draw any aggression cards you find, but if Digging Deep or White Fox are there, you're also going to grab the benefits of them still. So yeah, really, really like this card with Domino. And lastly, we have Adam Warlock. I think the first place I've seen this is, I think they're called Classy Robot. They have a deck on Marvel CDB called Grave Robber. The general gist is you're going to get Jackpot and you're going to discard it with Adam's ability, and it's going to do all the things, and it's very, very good. Up next, I'm going to call this, where to juggle. You have these locations, which are both very good for Domino. I bring these in most of my decks for her. Weapon X discards from your deck. So all the discarding, toys are going to fire off with this. And then Avengers Mansion, if I want a specific card, say Pip has moved, Avengers Mansion is just a very low commitment, kind of infinite way to just, I'll just go and grab it. It's just generally a strong card. Very easy to get into play when you're constantly getting Jackpot into your hand. So yeah, very, very strong. I've called this catching cards, and, if moving all these cards around is, juggling them, you're going to drop a few occasionally, right? And that's where Painted Lady comes in. After you discard from the top of your deck, attach a card face down here to a maximum of 3. That is very strong, because then the alter ego action also on this card is exhaust the Painted Lady and add 1 attached card to your hand. one cost support, very easy to get into play. And if you discard something, you're like, oh, I wish I had drawn that into my hand. I was really relying on that. Well, this card will save you. And what's really interesting is, you know, I think Pip is so vital to her game plan. If you accidentally discard Pip, Painted Lady can catch it. You can flip down and grab it. But also vice versa. If Pip is in play and you lose Painted Lady from discard it, you can use Pip to put it on top of your deck. Make sure you get it next turn or with some card draw, Weapon X, whatever you have. So you kind of got some backup chances between these two cards. And of course, you can just swap to Alter Ego and use Domino's ability to swap with the top of your deck. The thing is, she has so many effects that this card, you might not be able to finish off everything you want in hero form and still have that card on top of the discard pile, which is where some of the strengths of this comes in. But you can also set up combos with Painted Lady and just grab, high value cards. You want to go Alter Ego a lot. If you accidentally discard one of your maybe few ways to confuse the enemy in, say, aggression, Psylocke, Professor X, you can grab those with Painted Lady, flip down, play them, use them to confuse the enemy, and then you're safe for that villain activation in solo. Strength in numbers, you can build a deck around this. You don't want to discard all of them accidentally, and it's quite powerful to grab on demand. If you've set up, say, a bunch of posse allies and want to sort of keep them healthy for now. Very strong. Repurpose, so much combo potential, but stashing a repurpose under the Painted Lady not only gives you consistent access to it at the right time, but you can also set up double repurpose turns very easily, which are very, very strong. And lastly, I think, since you count double resources, just the way you would count a wild, you get double the value of an ordinary card. When you discard it, it counts 2. So what I'm trying to say here is they're very good to discard with your discarding cards because you get the bonus, but then you haven't got the double resource to pay for stuff. But Painted Lady kind of solves that. I use Painted Lady to catch double resources all the time. That is a very, very nice benefit to have. So this is kind of where we end up with. So what we can basically see here is Domino is crazy. She has nearly infinite possibilities. She can grab all sorts of cards from all sorts of places, move them around, have different things interact with discarding, drawing cards. It's a lot. And it's really fun. She is a very deep and complex character. And in a way, this adds a lot of variety. But I don't think this is without its flaws. And, I know everyone wants to celebrate Domino, but I've got to be real with you guys on my thoughts. I think they gave her a little bit too much here. I think they kind of gave her all the discarding stuff, all the stuff moving around, and digging deep white fox. So these kind of go in all of her decks. She has so many moving pieces that I think it slows down the game, both from a planning perspective, but also she has a lot of things to do. And I think in solo play, most of the time that is fine because it's you doing it, and if you're engaged having fun, that is all good. And in multiplayer, if other players are waiting, something I have observed personally, Domino has long turns, very long turns sometimes. She can do a whole bunch of stuff, clear most of the problems on the board, and she's barely even touched the cards in her hand. She has so many things to activate and do, and she kind of has a solution to any problem. Probability field can boost any stat you need. Your pistols are also always on hand. They can basically deal with any minion. She reminds me a lot of Venom and SPDR, Penny Parker, in the way that once you are set up, you can kind of deal with anything. She does have the kind of weakness where she does want to go Alter Ego a lot because that is where she can set everything up. But she can kind of do whatever she needs whenever she needs to, especially if she starts Alter Ego. A lot of people like that. So if you like those characters, that is excellent. For me, I think I kind of get to a point in the game where I've set up enough things, I can deal with anything, and I kind of know I've won at that point. Even if I still have to take out, almost all the villains' first health and second stage health. There are games like that. So I think while she's the luck-based hero, what I'm actually doing with her is I'm guaranteeing I can kind of do anything. Putting specific cards where I need them to be. I don't feel I'm manipulating luck so much as I'm, basically just precisely doing what I need to do. I almost feel like I'm playing more of a mastermind character, or very internally focused, skill based character. I'm just doing things very precisely and making a lot of calculations, um, as opposed to, oh, that was lucky. Because if you're specifically doing it, is it luck? It's a card game. It's inherently luck based. By putting specific cards somewhere, you're kind of controlling the luck, and that is sort of what she does. But I think it's a bit too precise in a lot of ways, and I kind of can't help wonder if the way Scarlet Witch approaches things, nudging boost icons about, getting second chance on cards, or even how, Gambit's alter ego ability works. If that's not a little bit more, manipulating luck in her favor rather than just, this very precise card movements. I do like it when I, without planning to hit jackpot or digging deep. That always feels very good and lucky. But yeah, that's just my thoughts. Still very fun character. Um, just more of a theme issue, I guess, in that regard. But yeah, I thought I'd talk about it. I'm curious what you guys think. Maybe I'm, in the, vast minority. Um, but yeah, uh, that is my take on Domino. And yeah, she has a lot going on. She'll take a long time to figure out. I'm sure you could be playing her for months and you'll still find new ways, these cards can interact, which is really cool in a lot of ways. And the last thing I want to talk before we get into the full ratings are, how you can use her wilds, how you can use jackpot. She's very good at meeting any resource requirements you need. So there are a lot of attachments that require multiple types of resources, sometimes all free. She can hit those super easy. With the wilds, if you need free specific resources of one type, very easy as well. And that goes for the encounter cards, but also the player cards. So dropkick, very easy for her to meet that. But also hone technique, and I've already talked about no quarter. These cards go together very well. Huge fan of that with her. So she's got a lot of cool possibilities like that. And then we'll get into the ratings, and we've talked about a lot of her cards and how she works. Things to discard, what you should maybe be looking out to discard, and all the moving things around. So we're gonna move through this fairly quick. Damage is huge. Good workout does damage. Probability field adds to damage. Luck be a lady can add to damage. But then she's got these pistols and sharpshooter, which we will cover a little bit later. Specifically to show you guys if you've not seen it. But basically, she just does damage and a lot of it. That is all I really have to say. She doesn't start necessarily with the ability to, but by the mid game, I'd be very surprised if you're not just destroying minions left and right, no problem. Or just churning through the villain's hit points very easily. Next up, we have threat removal, which was a hard one to rank because she starts with that one threat removal, but probability field is a big benefit, and right place, right time is very good. And with cards like Pip the Pug, she can just take right place, right time, put it on top of her deck, draw it, and there you go. You flip up if you started Alter Ego, and there's your threat removal. And of course, Luck be a lady as well. She's a lot of cards which do a lot of things, or set up to get the perfect card. So she can get threat removal when she needs it. But again, turn one threat removal. You're not going to have any guarantees of having the right upgrades or cards to remove threat. So she does have a weakness there, I would say. But 3 stars is kind of what I'd say is average. So if your weakness is average, you're in a pretty good place. So next up we have survivability, which I've put at 4. Free defense, very strong. Probability field upping that defense, very strong. Like be a lady healing, very strong. Probability field also increasing your recovery, very strong. And lucking good, letting you basically, take a boost card and say, I don't want that one, I'll have a different one. She's very good. It's a little bit like what I was saying, how I wish maybe her luck functioned a bit more like Scarlet Witch or Gambit's alter ego ability, getting a second chance or, nudging things around. The only reason I don't think Lucky and Good is, one of her best cards is only because she has to basically be the one defending to use it, is my understanding. It has the defense trait, and it has to be an attack against you. So if an ally is defending it, the attack is against them. If another player's defending it, the attack is against them. So she has to commit to defending it when she can use probability field to thwart or attack, and when she's flipping a lot, so she's not always being attacked in the first place. But very, very good card nonetheless. Really, really like this. This one is very fun, and I like the art as well there. Yeah, big fan of her survivability, but she does still have the 9 hit points and no dedicated, defense event. It's nothing like backflip where you can just cancel everything out. So she can be a little bit vulnerable, especially if she's attacked multiple times, but overall, completely solid. Really, really tough character to take down. most of the time. Economy is 6 stars. If you heard what I was saying about swapping jackpot, repeatedly, getting the triple resource jackpot all the time, can't really argue with that. It can be buried in your deck, but even then, digging deep is very easy to accidentally draw into. Swap back, discard again, get that and the card you initially swapped it with. So very, very powerful. Um, her economy isn't necessarily, oh, I'm rich from turn one every turn, but normally you are pretty well off, and once you've got a couple of upgrades and things in play, she is just filthy rich. It is definitely a massive strength of hers. Up next is control, and control is stopping the villain from doing what they want to do, messing up their games. Stuns would count here. They'd also count for survivability, but she doesn't have those. What she does have is Lucky Break, which is basically a cheap version of Spycraft, where you don't need a spy. Has to be in hero form, but it is still a very good way that if you've got a nasty encounter card, say Shadow of the Past, you can just say, no, not today, swap it out, get something else. Normally that'll be a better option, a less harsh encounter card. And we've already talked about Lucky and Good, that can cancel boost effects, which is very useful. That is probably the most powerful part of it. So she has some control, but she's not going to be able to use them when she's Alter Ego. One of them is only when she's defending. She's only got one copy of each of these, so it's not like you're going to be able to start the game and have this running from the get-go. So I stuck with 2 stars, but it's a strong 2 stars, and when her things help you, they really help. So I still like them a lot. Reliability, I put at 3 stars. Now, this is a bit of a tricky one, because with Pip and Painted Lady, you can quite reliably get the cards you need. But my experience with Domino, and from watching other people play Domino, is games can go very differently depending on what you happen to draw in your first couple of turns. Your forwarding can be in a really difficult place, or if you don't find Pip or Painted Lady, in the first half of your deck, you might end up discarding them or other valuable cards and not really have a good way to save them, which can hurt a character who relies on, moving things so precisely as Domino. But again, she is reliable once set up, and I do think overall she's fine. So 3 stars, pretty good, but you can have worse games with her. So worth noting. Readiness, how fast she can be set up, I put it at 2. She can draw cards quickly, and again, if you get Pip and Painted Lady, this will change, but there's no guarantees of that. So she wants a lot of upgrades in play, both her pistols, sharpshooter, probability field, Pip, Painted Lady. I think most people, kind of want to play all of these as soon as they can. You don't have to play all of them to do well, but I do generally think they're all worth it. Outside of, you're about to win in the next turn or so, maybe not, but they are all very strong. So longer games, multiplayer games, definitely. Solo, we've ended up playing most of them, if I'm honest, most of the time. So she goes just from, pretty strong to extremely strong, but she does have to build her way up there. Now, card value is an interesting one. I've talked about how her forcing and attack events are, they're good. They're not exceptional, but they're good. Everything else, honestly, I think is, kind of busted. I've put card value at S tier. You can just, use one of her allies to hit the whole board, or, Pip to move anything you need to the top of your deck, within your own cards. Luck be a lady, extremely good. Probability field, extremely good. Painted Lady, extremely good. Just incredible. So, yeah, big fan of her card value. I think her card value is very, very, very good. And along with her economy and damage, probably her biggest strength. I'd probably even say, card value is maybe her biggest strength of all of these, but they've all earned that purple star. Didn't explain this at the start of the video, but basically I'm rating the categories out of 5, but I think if anything is particularly exceptional, it gets an extra star, and that has now happened in 3 categories, which is pretty good. And then we have a card value, which is very interesting for Domino. I've talked about her forwarding and attack events, which I think are good, really solid, really good, happy to have them, there's no problem with them. But everything else I think is kind of busted, so I've gone ahead and put her card value at 6. I probably should have explained this. I am rating the categories mostly out of 5, but I think if anything is exceptional, I put it up to 6. And I think that is where her cards land. Her hero kit is just so unbelievably good. You draw them. That is almost your top priority to play, unless you've got like a really specific aspect strategy. Um, but even then, they are fighting for your attention. They are so good. Hip, just the control he offers is so good. Painted Lady, the control and precision and combo potential it offers, so good. Like Be a Lady, incredible. Probability Field, incredible. They both just solve everything. Diamondback just hitting the whole board, better in multiplayer, but still, good, I would say. Anywhere, this is very, very good value of her cards. I think her cards, are some of her probably, I've given economy and damage each an extra star, but I think card value is at least equal, if not the best part of her. Everything she does is very, very good. So yeah, big fan of that. And then we've got ease of play, and you guys remember this? She is complicated, and she has broken my system. She has so many possibilities. I think she is by far the most complex character in the game, but none. I think even if they did take away a third of the moving pieces, I still think she is the most complicated character in the game. So many intricate combos, different possibilities. She is, options the character. She can do so much on any given turn. So there's definitely a learning curve there, and I've definitely seen, people have to try and adapt to that. And even then, there are still things people are missing, and probably I'm missing. There is so much going on. Yeah, she broke my system. So she has the purple star, but no other stars. This is basically a 1 star, but extra, in the opposite direction, almost a negative, almost a 0. She is just significantly more complex than other heroes. Ease of play is tricky to measure because you don't have to play her perfectly to do fairly well with her. So I could have actually put this up a bit, and said she's quite forgiving of mistakes, just go for it, no problem. But on the other hand, the skill ceiling is, you can't see it. It is that high, really. That is how it feels. So the perfect domino game is pretty elusive. But you can still do well enough with her. So I don't think her ease of play score here should be intimidating. If you've not played her yet, I don't want you to think, oh, she'll be too much for me. I think if you are getting stuck with decisions, focus on those cards I highlighted, Digging Deep, White Fox, Jackpot. You will still do perfectly well. And yeah, you don't have to make the perfect choice every time because it's very difficult to identify what that is a lot of the time. Because she has a lot of sequencing as well as heavy decisions. And moving parts and lots of things on the board. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. But yeah, she's definitely broken my rating system. Then we're going to talk about variety and fun factor. So for variety, it really comes down to different experiences with her. So I'm going to talk about her decks, and I think she has a lot of cards that are so good for her that almost designed for her that you want to automatically include them. And a lot of other cards which aren't quite at that level, but are still going in a vast majority of her decks. So auto includes I've got White Fox and Digging Deep. We talked about those a lot. Discard them from your deck, get benefits. Very, very good for her. Sharpshooter, when you make a ranged attack, which is what both her pistols are, discard a card from the top of your deck, deal 1 additional damage for each resource icon, doubles the damage of her pistols. Extraordinary. Don't leave home without it. I sometimes run 2 of them, just in case I discard one early and I want to try and get that damage out there. And lastly, we've got Weapon X, which as a card which discards from the top of your deck, obviously benefits, with White Fox, Digging Deep, all that kind of thing. She has a mutant trait to get it in play, obviously. So you can now use build support to cheat things in, a bit like Make the Call. So you could ignore the mutant trait with other characters, but it does suit her very, very well. And she wants to go Alter Ego a lot, which obviously, just works really well with Weapon X. So I think if I see a deck without those cards in, there has to be an extraordinarily good explanation for it. I can see if you're running, maybe you're not going into the posse that much. Maybe you want to set up a board of allies which stick around. Maybe you don't have room for White Fox. But even then, I think she's worth it, even if you just get her early, It's hard to imagine not using those cards. Then we've got the mostly includes, and yeah, there's a lot of basic cards she really likes. Hope Summers is a new card that cannot be used in the campaign, and at the time I'm recording this is not on Marvel CDB, so I don't think a lot of people are that aware of her. But she copies the traits on your identity, so she's an extra posse ally, and she grabs a superpower card from your deck, so she's a really good way to get probability field early. Atlas Bear is up next, already talked about her in this video. Good, Not essential, but I think if you're running posse stuff, you probably are going to throw her in. Speaking of which, we have the card called the Posse. Heal 1 damage from each posse character and ready them. You can only play it if you've got 3 posse characters in play, but it is very, very good once you have that set up. So I thought this card originally was going to be an auto include. I don't think it is in reality, but still, anything you're doing with the posse characters, if you're leaning into that, you obviously want this card, and it is very, very good. It is also a wild, very good just to have in the deck, such as Deadpool is. Deadpool has the wild resource icon, solid flexible ally. Any deck I've made for her where I'm not leaning too much into the posse, I am bringing Deadpool every time. Great as a wild, great as an ally, absolutely solid. Already talked about Avengers Mansion, how I bring it all the time. I just think the extra card draw makes all her card juggling. This gives you that extra option. It's very powerful, very easy to pay for. And she has a lot of resource cards in her decks typically because digging deep, you've got 3 of those. I do think she justifies the double resources in pretty much every deck. But also, you have, the other resource cards in the game are mostly all just wild resources. So getting extra card draw to make sure you can put those resources onto a card is good. I could also include X-Gene here, or maybe even Deft Focus as resource generators for her, but I don't particularly think she needs them, so I don't consider them, a mostly include. Although, yeah, very strong. X-Gene as a wild, maybe it should have been there. A lot of good options for her. Lastly, Professor X, who we've talked about, is a flipping hero. His confuse and threat removal, and covering her threat removal, very, very, very good. Used him in most of my Domino decks as well. Again, bit tough if you don't have the ally space with a lot of posse stuff, but still very strong. So she has a lot more auto includes, and not quite auto includes, but borderline, in my opinion, much more than most characters. The only ones I can think of that are similar are the Web Warriors. So that is definitely a little blow to the variety, because the other thing is, a lot of these cards are very high priority for her, especially the ones on the left. They're the ones you're swapping a lot, or you're trying to get in play pretty quick. So I think that hurts her variety. Doesn't matter what aspect I'm playing, I'm almost universally wanting to get these into play. So that is a blow to the variety. However, her ability to recur stuff and, catch stuff with Painted Lady does offer a lot of possibilities in itself. And I would say for, the rest of the cards in her deck, she has more variety than most characters ever will. So some decks I like for her, Global Logistics, this actually lets her mess with the encounter deck, which feels a lot like, you're manipulating luck in that respect as well. Hone Technique, we've talked about, her resources set that up very nicely. Probability field doesn't exhaust, so readying, repurpose in protection, very, very good for her. You can just ready up, use probability field again on whatever you need. I think that's phenomenal. And obviously, she is the queen of recursion, so recurring some of the most powerful allies in the game just makes sense. I also like strength in numbers for her, and you can also run, decks focused on the posse with all the ally-based stuff in leadership very well as well. Kind of feel like maybe her and Cable's, precons, maybe they should have had the other aspects, but the aspects they have do suit them very well as well. Then we have Multiple Man, who I think has interesting interactions with her. Not really an archetype or anything. But, if she draws 2 of them in her opening hand, she can swap 1 back. So when she plays 1, she will get full value. He's one of my favorite allies. Thought that was worth a mention. I've called the one below Encountering the Posse. So the weakness of leaning into the posse is you really want to get a bunch of them out on the board, but you don't start with any of them. So one way or another's card draw helps you set that up. Chance Encounter helps you specifically exactly find them. So I think that's very good for her in solo. And, you can add in some threat removal to cover for her starting 1 forwarding. Very good. Also maybe best suited to Justice, but you can do this with anything, especially in multiplayer. It's what I'm calling the Back to School archetype. So with Back to School, it's all about, mutant education. And this has multiple benefits for her. Yes, you get to shuffle some really powerful cards back into your deck. I think that is very strong. Things like Luck Be a Lady, there is only 1 copy of. Getting that back in is useful. But by shuffling your signature cards in, your wild resources back into your deck, you're increasing the ratio of wild resources to non-wild resources in your deck. So all you're discarding, other cards are hitting harder on average. So I think that is very good for her. And then we've got Boot Camp. She's got strong defense to start off with. So I think having a Boot Camp to power up allies is great. She's not relying on allies to defend too much, especially as she flips a lot as well. So that makes sense. And you can even run, Boot Camp with the posse for more damage from them that way. So yeah, very cool options. There's tons more than this. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Um, I will link the leadership deck I talked about earlier in the description, but I'll also link my own global logistics deck I've published on Marvel CDB. So definitely check below for that. So what does this leave her for variety? I've given her a 4. I just think a lot of the times the best choice is kind of the normal choice. And you don't have to go for it, but I could play Iron Man and not bother playing any tech cards, but I would suffer. And that's more of an extreme look. But I do think some of her best cards are the cards you are looking to play all the time. And she does have a lot of cards automatically included in her deck. Um, I've went through all the top decks on the first couple pages of Marvel CDB, and the percentage including the auto includes and mostly includes is very, very high. There's nothing really like that for Cable or for most heroes in my opinion. So that hits her, but she does have so many possibilities. And if you do play the same deck, say 10 times, things will unfold very differently depending on what you find first, and how you need to move things in regards to whatever situation is in front of you. So she does have a lot of really good variety. It does just take a slight blow for me because there are some predictable patterns in deck building and play. But still very, very strong, loads of possibilities. So where does this leave her in terms of fun? Originally, I had 5 stars. I put it down to 4. I do just think she solves too much too easily once set up. That is not something I like too much. What I like about card games is you have a random, hand of cards, a random, set of solutions, and then you have a random problem in front of you, and you're kind of trying to make this random hand solve this random problem. And I think a lot of the time for her, between just having cards that can kind of deal with everything and the ability to specifically move exact cards to an exact place, it takes away a lot of that puzzle solving aspect. It's a different kind of puzzle. It's still fun, but it's different. So a bit like for the reasons I'm not super keen on playing Venom and Penny Parker myself, that is just knocked off a 1 star for me. But she is exceptionally fun. I think for a lot of people, she would score a 5 here or even a 6. I know she's been very, very popular, and I can see why. I am enjoying her, but I just couldn't make it up to a 5. I actually, if I had to choose, there are characters, I'm going for above her. But I still like to play her. Very, very strong, very enjoyable, very unique. So that about does it for our list of 11 categories. There is only one other thing we have not done, which is rank her for power. That is what the question marks on the screen are here for. So where do I think she falls? Originally, I had her in S tier, but I'm weighing it up, and I just think where she has to put so many upgrades in play to get that powerful engine rolling, I couldn't quite justify it. I do think multiplayer, she gains a little bit of a boost because it's easier to go alter ego, which is what she wants to do. So solo, that is a little bit trickier. Not always that difficult, especially if you build for it, but you are having to build into ensuring that rather than building into, other things. So it is a factor. So lastly, we come to the power ranking. That is what these question marks are on the screen that have been here. And where do I think she falls on the tier list? That has been difficult to answer. I think I originally put her in S tier, but I also think she has, a lot of variability in the early game, depending on your luck. She has a lot of things to build up. I actually compare her a lot to Ironheart and SPDR. I think she falls around that mark. So knocking on the door to top tier, top 10, S tier, but I don't think she quite makes it for me personally. I think she's very, very close, and I think once she's set up, she feels like she is. But I think she can have some rough early games, which is probably the main downside for her, which I don't think the top 10 actually suffer from. So that's just kind of keeping her out from mine personally. But I think in multiplayer, where you can afford to go alter ego more easily, she's, maybe she is, or even closer, and still very strong. So I'm putting her in my A plus tier. I'm not really doing plus or minus tiers, but I wanted to signify she's at the very top of my A tier. So she's kind of, level with my, Ironheart, SPDR, all those characters that I put in my tier list up around there. She is roughly in that point. I could see her moving up. She's very complicated. Maybe I've missed some things, and it is early days. I'm not saying this is definitive. I could change my mind. But this is really how I feel right now after giving it a lot of thought and, playing her against a lot of old villains. And I'm starting to play a lot of the old heroes with a lot of the new cards. Like I've said about Star-Lord and the discarding cards. I don't think she's necessarily, breaking the game, although it does feel like it at times. Top 10 is just slightly out of the reach in my opinion, but still very, 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 very powerful character. So yeah, that about does it. I've rated her here in the conclusion onto some pros and cons. She's incredibly unique. No one discards quite like her, even though other characters can run the discarding cards. Um, so many possibilities every turn. She can move so many pieces, which makes it a very complex character with lots of, she has really a mini game of moving these cards around. Cable's mini game is trying to defeat all these side schemes most efficiently and sequence things that way. She has a puzzle where she's trying to move basically her whole deck around. So that's very cool. I do like that she has a variety of things she can do in her decks, even if the play patterns do, go somewhat similar. I think she's actually kind of a kit-focused character in a lot of ways. Even the aspect things you want to do are going to rely on you getting specific kit pieces into play and leaning on those to enable them, which is fine. It's not a downside. I like it. And yeah, I do think one of the big issues, which I did talk about, is she has so many choices, it can slow down the game. Analysis paralysis, I think, is very real with her. I've seen it on stream, I've seen it in person, and even if you get used to it, there's still way more options for her to consider than anyone else on a given turn. And I do think those long turns are, a relevant factor in multiplayer. You might not notice it in the first couple games with the newness, new character, it's very exciting. But I do think, a few months down the line, if Domino comes up and every turn of hers is taking twice as long as anyone else at the table, you may be going to notice it a bit. I do think that's relevant. I do think there's less deck building space in her decks, which for me as a deck builder hurts me a little bit. Still tons of possibility, but I do kind of wish maybe there was a few less. I do like that the discarding cards are in the aspect pool, but it feels like digging deep. White Fox feels like they really were extra hero signature cards for her, but they didn't have room for. Same for Sharpshooter. So definitely have less room for creativity, even though she innately has a lot of room for it in the interactions she has. The theme, again, I don't feel like I'm manipulating luck too much. I really feel like I'm precisely placing things. I feel more like I'm playing 4D chess than I'm playing a character who just gets lucky. That's just how I feel, and I think people will disagree with this, but that is my take on it. And again, I do find her always kind of being able to deal with things a little bit too easily once set up. Setting up does, demand it's rewarded, but for me, I just think she has too many convenient options from just really the mid game for my personal enjoyment. But still a very, very cool character. I'm really glad she's in the game. Excited to play more of her. Hope you've enjoyed this. If you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. What I actually started this channel for was to do deck building kind of topics or talk about specific cards. Maybe 5-10 minutes on a specific card, 20 minutes on an archetype, anything like that. That has not happened. I'm looking to in the future, but let me know what you guys would enjoy. I'd love to talk more about the villain and modular side of Next Evolution as well. But yeah, thank you for watching and have a good day. Bye.